Welcome to Nikki Woo Cozy Stories. I'm your host, Nikki. Tonight's story is a soft reimagining of The Three Little Pigs, a story of quiet beginnings, of choices made in their own time, and of learning, gently, what it means to build something that will hold. So settle in and let the story begin. In a low stretch of countryside, where the fields rose and fell in gentle curves, there stood a small cottage just beyond a hedge grove. It wasn't large, nor particularly grand, but it had been shaped with care over time, and it rested easily in its place, as though it had always belonged there. The earth around it was worn soft by familiar steps, and a narrow path led from its door outward toward the wider land beyond. Morning came quietly in that place. Light would gather first along the tops of the grasses, then slip down into the meadow, touching the stones, the fence posts, the low branches of the trees. By the time it reached the cottage, the day had already begun its slow unfolding. Inside lived a mother pig and her 3 young ones. They had not always been so grown as they were now. There had been a time when they stayed close at her side, content to follow her wherever she led. But seasons have a way of moving things forward, whether noticed or not, and lately there had been small changes. Subtle at first, then harder to overlook. The first of the 3 had taken to waken early, though not for any particular reason or purpose. He would step outside before the others, stretch, and set off across the field with an easy sort of eagerness, chasing whatever caught his attention. If a bird lifted suddenly from the grass, he would follow it with quick, bounding steps. If the wind shifted, he would turn with it, as though it had invited him along. He rarely stayed in one place for long. The second was not so quick to leave the doorway. He lingered in the mornings, watching the light settle over the land, considering where he might go and what he might do. Once he had chosen, he moved with a steadier pace, though it was not unusual for him to pause midway, distracted by something simpler or more comfortable than what he had first intended. The third often remained behind the others, not from reluctance, but from a habit of noticing. He would stand a moment longer at the edge of the yard, looking not only to where the path led, but at the ground beneath it, at the way the hedgerow bent slightly where the wind had passed, at the quiet spaces between things. When he did begin to walk, it was without hurry, as though he had already decided where he meant to go. Their mother saw all of this. She said little as the days moved along, but her attention was steady, and it rested on each of them in turn. There was no urgency in her manner, no sign of worry, only a quiet understanding that seemed to deepen as the light shifted from morning into afternoon, and then into evening again. That evening came gently as the others had before it. The sun lowered itself beyond the far line of the trees, and the sky softened into a pale wash of color that lingered just above the horizon. The air cooled slightly, carrying with it the faint rustle of leaves and the distant call of something unseen. The 3 little pigs returned one by one. The first came quickly, as he often did, his step still carrying the restless energy of the day. The second followed not long after, slower now. His earlier wandering had given way to a kind of quiet settling. And the third arrived last, moving at the same steady pace with which he had left, as though the time between had not hurried him at all. They gathered near the doorway, where the last of the light touched the ground in a narrow strip before fading. For a time, nothing was said. The stillness of the evening seemed to ask for a kind of listening, and they remained there with it, aware of the small sounds that filled the space, the shifting of the grass, the soft settling of the earth beneath them, the distant wind moving through the hedgerow. At last, their mother stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice, nor did she call them closer. They were already near enough, and what she had to say did not require more than that. "My dears," she said, her tone even and unhurried, "you have grown." The words didn't come as a surprise, though hearing them spoken seemed to give them a weight that it hadn't quite held before. "The world beyond this place is wide," she continued, her gaze moving gently from one to the next, "and it is time you began to make your own way in it." The first little pig shifted slightly, not with unease, but with something closer to anticipation. The thought of a wider world seemed to stir something bright within him. The second listened with a quieter expression, his attention fixed on her words, though not yet fully settled on what they might require. The third did not move at all. He stood as he had before, his focus steady, as though he had been waiting for this moment, without knowing it would come. "You will each build a home of your own," their mother said, "a place that will shelter you and hold what is yours." She didn't give them instruction beyond that. There were no details offered, no guidance on how such things should be done. The space she left unspoken seemed as intentional as the words themselves. The light at the edge of the field had nearly faded now, and the first hint of the evening's deeper quiet began to settle over the land. For a while longer, they remained together. Then as the last of the colors slipped from the sky, the moment passed, not abruptly, but with the same gentle certainty with which it had arrived. In the morning, the path beyond the hedgerow would be waiting, and each of them would take to it in his own way. Morning arrived with a pale, steady light that seemed to rest lightly upon the land before deepening into day. The hedgerow held the last of the night's coolness, and the grasses, still touched with dew, bent softly beneath the faintest movement of air. The path beyond the cottage lay open. The three little pigs stepped out into it without ceremony, though each did so in his own way. The first moved ahead almost at once, his steps quick and untroubled, as though the path itself had been waiting for him alone. He didn't look back, nor did he pause to consider how far it might lead. There was a sense in him that the day would offer what it would, and that would be enough. The second followed after, though not quite as quickly. He lingered just long enough to glance once over his shoulder, then turned forward again, settling into a pace that felt comfortable to him. There was no urgency in it, but neither was there resistance. The path, once taken, held his attention for a while. The third remained behind only a moment longer. He stood at the edge where the worn earth met the open field, noticing the way the light had shifted since the evening before, and the way the ground felt firmer beneath his feet as it moved from the cottage. Then, with quiet certainty, he began to walk. The path soon widened, then split, and the three little pigs, without needing to say so, went their separate ways. The first little pig followed a stretch of ground that curved gently through the meadow. The grasses grew tall there, brushing lightly against him as he passed, and the air carried a warmth that spoke of day already well begun. He moved easily, content with the motion itself, letting his attention drift from one small thing to another. Before long, he came upon a man walking slowly along the edge of the field, carrying a bundle of straw tied neatly at both ends. The straw caught the light in soft, pale strands, shifting slightly as the man adjusted it on his shoulder. The first little pig slowed, not out of hesitation, but because something about the bundle had caught his interest. "Good morning," he said, drawing near. The man returned the greeting with a nod, his steps unbroken. "That is a fine bundle you carry," the pig went on, his eyes following the loose ends of the straw that stirred faintly in the air. "It serves a purpose," the man replied, adjusting his grip. The pig walked alongside him for a few steps, considering. The straw seemed light, easy to gather, easy to shape. It held together well enough, and there was something pleasing in its simplicity. "I am to build a house," the pig said at last, as though the thought had only just settled into place. "Would you give me some of your straw?" The man regarded him for a moment, then shifted the bundle down from his shoulder. Without question or comment, he loosened the binding and set aside a portion. "If it will serve you, you may have it," he said. The pig accepted it readily, his satisfaction plain, though quietly held. He thanked the man and turned away, carrying the straw with a lightness that matched his step. It didn't take long to choose a place. The ground he selected lay slightly raised above the surrounding meadow, where the grasses thinned and the earth felt dry beneath his feet. A small stand of shrubs stood nearby, offering a sense of enclosure without closing the space entirely. It seemed to him as good a place as any. He set the straw down and began at once. There was no careful measuring, no long consideration of how one piece might fit with another. Instead, he gathered the straw in armfuls, laying it down, then layering more upon it, shaping walls by pressing and adjusting until they stood well enough on their own. The work moved quickly beneath his hands, each step following easily from the last. From time to time, the straw shifted, settling in ways he had not quite intended, but he smoothed it over without concern. The lightness that made it easy to build was also making it easy to correct, and he found a kind of quiet satisfaction in watching the structure take form so quickly. The sun rose higher as he worked, and before long, the outline of the small house stood before him. He stepped back to look at it. It wasn't large, but it was complete. The walls held their shape, the doorway stood open, and the roof, though loosely laid, covered the space beneath it. The straw caught the sunlight in the soft, golden tones, and the whole of it seemed to rest lightly upon the ground. The first little pig regarded it with a sense of ease. It had not taken much time, nor much effort, and yet it stood. The simplicity of it pleased him, and he felt no need to question whether more might have needed to be done. He carried the last loose straw to the side and arranged it without much thought, then stepped inside. Within, the light filtered gently through the walls, softened by the straw so that it felt in quiet patterns along the ground. The air felt warm, held in place by the structure around him, and the space, though small, was enough. He settled there for a time, listening. Outside, the meadow moved as it always had, the grasses bending, the distant sounds of the day carrying on without interruption. Nothing in the world beyond his doorway seemed to have changed, and within, all was still. The house, newly made, stood easily where it had been set, and the first little pig, having finished his work, rested in the comfort of it, certain that it would hold. The day moved on without interruption, as days often do. The light, which had risen clear and steady in the morning, softened as it passed into afternoon. A mild breeze traveled across the meadow, shifting the grasses in slow, overlapping patterns. Nothing in the land suggested change. The quiet held the same gentle rhythm. The straw house stood where it had been set, light against the earth, its pale surface catching what remained of the sun. Inside, the first little pig rested. He had not meant to sleep, but the warmth of the small space and the ease that followed his work had drawn him into stillness. The faint movement of the air through the straw made a soft, constant sound, like something settling into place. It didn't trouble him. If anything, it seemed to reassure. Outside, the path lay open. From a distance, along that same path, another figure approached. He didn't hurry, nor did he pause. His steps were measured, quiet against the ground, and he moved with a kind of purpose that didn't need to announce itself. The breeze shifted slightly as he came nearer, though not enough to disturb the balance of the field. The wolf came to a stop before the straw house. For a moment, he stood without speaking, regarding the structure with a calm, steady gaze. The straw stirred faintly where it had been laid, but held in place. The doorway remained open. At length, the wolf stepped closer. Little pig, he said, his voice even, carrying easily through the stillness. Let me come in. Inside, the first little pig stirred. He lifted his head, not at once alarmed, but attentive now in a way that he hadn't been before. The voice, though unfamiliar, had reached him clearly enough. I will not, he replied after a moment. Not by the hair of my chinny chin. The words came quickly, as though they had formed themselves without much thought behind them. Outside, the wolf didn't change his stance. Then I'll huff, he said, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in. The meadow, which had been so quiet, seemed to pause. The wolf drew in a breath, not sharply, but deeply, and released it in a long, steady force. The air moved across the straw, pressing into it, testing the way it had been set together. The walls shifted. At first, it was slight, a loosening here, a small separation there. The straw, which had been gathered quickly, began to give in small, uneven ways. The breeze, once gentle, seemed to gather into something stronger as it met the wolf's breath. Inside, the first little pig rose to his feet. He looked toward the doorway, then toward the walls, as though expecting them to hold as they had before. The movement around him did not yet seem real. Outside, the wolf drew in another breath. This time, the force came stronger. The straw lifted, not all at once, but in pieces that gave way one after another. The roof shifted, the walls loosened, and then, with a soft, sudden collapse, the house came apart. Straw scattered into the air, rising and turning before falling back in the light, uneven drifts across the ground. For a moment, there was motion, quick, unsettled. Then the wolf stepped forward. He crossed the threshold without hurry, passing into the space where the house had stood. The straw shifted beneath his weight, settling again as he moved through it. There was the sound of movement within, brief and indistinct. Then, that too ceased. The breeze passed once more across the field, carrying with it a few loose strands of straw that lifted and fell again, not far from where they had been laid. The doorway, no longer held in place by anything at all, opened only onto empty ground. No voice came from within it. The place where the small house had stood remained, but altered now in a way that couldn't be set back as it had been. The wolf didn't remain there long. After a time, he stepped back into the open, his path returning back to the field as though nothing had delayed him. He didn't look behind him as he went. The grasses closed softly in his wake. The light continued its slow descent toward evening, unchanged in its course. The field, which had held the shape of the straw house only a short while before, settled into its own quiet. The light faded slowly from the meadow, leaving behind a softer, quieter kind of evening. The grasses no longer moved in wide, shifting patterns, but settled into smaller motions, as though the land itself had drawn inward. What remained of the day lingered close to the ground, then slipped away, without notice. Farther along the path, beyond the place where the straw once stood, the second little pig continued on. He had not seen what happened behind him. The field had curved, and the hedgerow had risen just enough to hide that part of the land from view. To him, the day had unfolded as it always had, one step leading easily into the next. And yet, as the light changed, he found himself slowing. It wasn't from weariness, exactly. There was a simple sense, faint, not fully formed, that the day was asking something more of him than he had first expected. He paused at the edge of the small clearing where the grass grew shorter and the ground lay firmer beneath his feet. A few scattered branches had fallen there, likely carried by wind or left behind from some earlier work. They rested in loose piles, uneven, but within reach. He looked at them for a moment. The thought of building had not left him. It had followed quietly at the back of his mind since the morning, though he had not yet chosen how he might begin. Now, standing there, the answer seemed close at hand. The branches were stronger than straw. They held a shape more firmly, and when he lifted one, it didn't shift or loosen in his grasp. There was a certain reassurance that in that weight, a feeling that something made from them might stand a little longer, hold a little better. He gathered a few, then more. The work didn't begin as quickly as it had for his brother. The branches required some arranging, some turning and adjusting before they would rest together in a way that resembled a wall. He set one piece against another, stepped back, then moved them again, searching for a balance that felt right. It took time. Not a great deal, but enough that the light shifted further while he worked. The ease he had hoped for didn't come at once, though neither did it trouble him enough to stop. Instead, he continued, fitting one branch across another, building upward in uneven lines that slowly took on the shape of a small enclosure. From time to time, he paused. He would look at what he had done, consider whether it might hold, return to the task without fully resolving the question. The structure grew in this way, part intention, part approximation. At last, as the first hints of evening settled more deeply into the clearing, the outline of a house stood before him. It was sturdier than straw. The branches, though not tightly bound, leaned into one another, forming walls that held their place when pressed. The roof lay across the top in overlapping lengths, not entirely even, but enough to cover the space beneath. He stepped back and regarded it. There was quiet satisfaction in what he saw. It had taken more effort than he had first imagined, and as a result, though imperfect, stood in a way that felt dependable, at least for now. He carried the remaining branches to one side, leaving them in a loose stack, then turned toward the doorway. Inside, the space felt different from the open field. The air did not move as freely, and the light, filtering through the gaps between the branches, fell in narrow lines across the ground. It was not as warm as it might have been, nor as enclosed, but it offered a kind of shelter. He stepped in and stood for a moment, listening. The clearing beyond remained quiet. The faint sounds of evening moved at a distance, the call of something unseen, the shifting of leaves, the soft settling of land as the day came to a close. Nothing pressed against the walls. Nothing disturbed the stillness. He moved further inside and lowered himself to the ground, resting against one side where the branches met. The structure held. That, more than anything, seemed enough. Outside, the last of the light slipped away, leaving the clearing in a muted, even tone. The shapes of the branches softened as the sky dimmed, though the outline of the house remained clear against the ground. The second little pig remained where he was, his attention drifting between the quiet within and the quiet beyond. There was no sense yet of anything approaching. The path lay unseen beyond the edge of the clearing, and whatever had passed along it earlier did not make itself known here. The night settled gently. The small house of sticks stood where it had been built, its walls uneven but present, its shape held together by what had been gathered and arranged. The night passed without disturbance, and morning returned in the same quiet manner as before. A soft light gathered along the edges of the clearing, touching first the upper branches, then settling gradually to the ground. The air was cool, holding the last trace of darkness before the day began in earnest. The small house of sticks stood as it had throughout the night. Its walls, though uneven, remained in place, the branches resting against one another in a balance that had not yet been tested. A few leaves had shifted along the ground, carried by the faintest movement of air, but nothing had pressed hard enough to alter the structure itself. Inside, the second little pig stirred. He rose slowly, the quiet of the space still holding around him. For a moment, he listened, as he had the evening before, attending to the small, distant sounds that marked the beginning of the day. Nothing seemed out of place. He stepped toward the doorway. The clearing lay open before him, unchanged in its shape. The same scattered branches, the same low growth at the edges, the same path leading away to the field. The morning gave no sign of what had passed elsewhere. He stood there for a time, not fully settled, though he could not have said why. Then, from the direction of the path, a figure appeared. The movement was quiet at first, almost indistinct against the shifting light, but as it drew nearer, its form became clear, steady, deliberate, and unhurried. The wolf came into the clearing. He didn't stop at once, but continued forward until he stood within a short distance of the house. His gaze rested on the structure, taking in its shape, its arrangement, and the way branches leaned into one another. For a moment, nothing was said. Then, as before, the wolf spoke. little pig," he said, his voice carrying evenly through the open space. "Let me come in." The second little pig remained where he was. Something in the tone, though calm, did not invite agreement. He held his place within the doorway, the frame of the house at his back. "I will not," he answered, "not by the hair of my chinny chin." The words came more deliberately than they might have the day before, though they held the same form. The wolf inclined his head slightly, as though acknowledging the reply. "Then I'll huff," he said, "and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in." The clearing seemed quiet. Even the smallest movement of the air appeared to pause, as though the space itself had drawn inward. The wolf drew in a breath. It came deep and steady, gathering before it was released. The force of it moved outward, pressing against the walls of the house, finding the spaces in the branches, testing the way that it had been set. The structure held for a moment. The branches shifted slightly, tightening where they met, then loosening again as the pressure continued. The sound was not loud, but it was present. A faint strain, as though the pieces were adjusting under a weight where they had not been made to bear. Inside, the second little pig stepped back. He looked along the walls, noting the places where the branches moved, where the gaps widened, where the balance he had trusted began to change. Outside, the wolf drew in another breath. This time, the force came stronger. The branches lifted and separated in uneven lines. One gave way, then another, and then the shape of the house began to falter. The roof shifted, sliding out of place as the support beneath it loosened. Then, with a sudden, uneven collapse, the structure fell. The branches scattered outward, striking the ground in a loose and broken heap. Leaves lifted briefly into the air before settling again, and the space where the house had stood openly, fully, to the clearing. For a brief moment, there was movement, quick, unsettled. Then the wolf stepped forward. He crossed into the space without haste, the broken branches shifting beneath his weight as he passed over them. The clearing, which had held the shape of the house only moments before, seemed to draw still around him. There was a sound within, faint, indistinct, then quickly gone. Then nothing. The air moved once more, lightly now, stirring a few leaves along the ground. The branches settled where they had fallen, no longer held in place by anything at all. The wolf remained for a short time. Then, as before, he turned. Without looking back, he left the clearing, his path returning to him to the open field beyond. The grasses bent softly as he passed, then lifted again. Once he had gone. The light continued to grow, the morning unfolding as it always did. But the clearing had changed. Where there had been a small house, uneven but standing, there was now only a scattered heap of branches, their arrangement broken beyond repair. The shape that had once held them together no longer existed. No movement came from within. No voice followed. The space remained open, quiet, and undisturbed. And the second little pig did not come out again. Morning came again, though not all mornings feel the same. The light spread across the field as it always had, touching the hedgerows, the worn paths, the quiet stretches of open land. Yet there were places now where something had shifted, not in a way that could be seen at once, but in the way stillness settled more deeply than before. Beyond the meadow, where the ground rose slightly and the soil lay firm beneath the grass, the third little pig walked on. He had traveled farther than the others. The path he followed did not quickly turn back toward familiar places, nor did it narrow into the soft, easy lines of the meadow. Instead, it carried him toward ground that held its shape more steadily, where the earth did not give way so easily beneath each step. He moved without hurry. From time to time he paused, not out of uncertainty, but to take notice. The wind here moved differently, less tangled in tall grass, more open across the wider ground. The air felt clearer, and the silence between sounds seemed to hold longer. At length, he came upon a man working near the edge of the road. Beside him lay a stack of bricks, neatly arranged, solid, and unmoving. Their surfaces held the warmth of the morning light, and their weight was evident from the distance. The third little pig approached. "Good morning," he said. The man looked up from his work and returned to the greeting with a nod. Those bricks were not like straw, nor like branches. They did not bend, nor shift, nor settle into a place without effort. They remained as they were, requiring intention to move, and more intention still to arrange. The pig stood a moment, considering. "I am to build a house," he said at last. "Would you give me some of your bricks?" The man regarded him quietly, then glanced toward the stack. "They are not light," he said. "I know," the pig replied. "They will take time to set." "I have time." The man studied him a moment longer, then gave a small nod. Without further question, he set aside a portion of the bricks, placing them where they could be gathered. "If they will serve you," he said, "you may have them." The third little pig inclined his head in thanks. He didn't carry them all at once. Instead, he took what he could, moved them carefully across the ground, and returned again for more. The work was steady and measured, each step taken with attention to balance and weight. It didn't move quickly, but it did not falter either. When at last he had gathered enough, he chose a place to build. The ground there was firm and even, not softened by excess grass nor broken by uneven roots. It held a quiet strength beneath it, as though it would support whatever was placed upon it, without shifting. He set the first brick down. He did not place another immediately. Instead, he looked at where it rested, adjusted its position slightly, and only then set the next beside it. The line formed slowly, one piece at a time, each resting securely before the next was added. The work required patience. The bricks did not yield to quick movement, nor did they settle into place without care. If one was set unevenly, It remained so until corrected. If a line shifted, it affected all that followed. The third little pig worked on. The sun moved higher in the sky, then began its slow descent again. Shadows lengthened, then softened. Still, he continued, lifting, placing, adjusting, stepping back, then returning to the work. The walls rose. Not all at once, but steadily, each layering building upon the last. The structure began to take shape. Not loosely, not approximately, but with a kind of quiet certainty that held from the ground upward. When the walls reached their height, he turned to the roof. This too required care. Each piece needed to rest securely upon what has already been set, not simply laid across it. The work slowed further, but it didn't stop. At last, as the light began to fade into evening, the house stood complete. The third little pig stepped back. He didn't look at it only once, nor with a quick glance. Instead, his gaze moved along the edges, across the lines where one brick met another, over the roof where each piece rested in place. He noted where it held firmly, where it might yet need adjustment, and where it stood, just as it should. The house didn't move. It didn't shift with the breeze, nor settle unevenly beneath its own weight. It remained exactly as it had been placed, held together, not by chance, but by the care that had gone into its making. He gathered the remaining bricks and set them aside, not scattered, but arranged in a small, ordered stack. Then he stepped inside. The air within felt still, not because it was closed off entirely, but because the walls held against the movement of the wind. The light entered only where it was meant to, falling in quiet, steady lines across the floor. He stood there for a moment, listening. Outside, the land continued as it always had, the distant movement of air, the sounds of evening settling across the fields. But within, there was a different kind of quiet. Not absence of sound, but the presence of something held. He lowered himself to rest. The day had been long, and the work had required more of him than either of his brothers might have given. Yet, there was no sense of strain in it now, only a steady awareness of what had been made and how it stood. The light faded fully. Night settled across the land once more, gentle and unhurried. The house of brick remained, and within it, the third little pig rested, not with certainty born of ease, but with a quiet understanding of what had been built and what might hold. The morning came with a steady, even light, settling across the ground without hurry. The house of brick stood as it had through the night, its walls held firm against the air, unmoved by the faint breeze that passed along the open land. The lines remained true, each brick resting where it had been placed, unchanged by time or weather. Inside, the third little pig stirred. He rose without urgency and stood for a moment in the quiet, listening as he had in the evening before. The stillness within the house was different from the stillness outside. It was not simply the absence of sound, but something more contained, something held in its place. He stepped toward the doorway. The land beyond stretched wide and open. The ground lay firm beneath the morning light, and the distant edges of the field rested in a soft haze that would lift as the day continued. Nothing moved near the house. Nothing suggested interruption, and yet, after a time, something appeared. At first, it was only a shape along the path, distant, indistinct. Then, as it drew nearer, it took on a familiar form. The wolf approached. He did not change his pace, nor did he hesitate. His steps were measured, deliberate, carrying him forward with quiet certainty. When he reached the house, he stopped. For a moment, he said nothing. His gaze moved along the brickwork, noting its structure, its weight, the way it held. At length, he spoke. "Little pig," he said, his voice even, almost courteous. "You may let me come in." The third little pig stood within the doorway. He didn't step back, nor did he move forward. He remained where he was, his attention steady. "I will not," he said, "not by the hair of my chinny chin chin." The wolf regarded him, neither surprised nor displeased. "Yes," he said quietly, "I thought as much." He drew in a slow breath. "Then I suppose," he continued, unhurried, "I shall have to huff and puff and blow your house in." The air seemed to settle. The wolf's breath gathered and moved outward, pressing against the walls, testing them in a steady, measured force. The bricks did not shift. He breathed again, deeper this time. Still, the house held. No line faltered, no weight gave way. The wolf let the air fall quiet again. "Well," he said after a moment, thoughtful rather than strained, "that is something." He stepped back slightly, studying the house once more. For the first time, the pattern did not complete itself. He considered this, then shifted his gaze again. "If you would rather not come out," he said, his tone smoothing again, "then perhaps we might meet elsewhere." The third little pig said nothing. "There is a field not far from here," the wolf went on. "Turnips grow there this time of year." He paused, not to persuade, but simply to let the thought settle. "I will be there in the morning," he said. "You may join me." The offer rested lightly in the air. The third little pig listened. "I will come," he said after a moment. The wolf gave a small nod. "Very well," he said. He turned then, without haste, and made his way back along the path, his steps steady and unbroken. The land opened behind him. The air moved once more across the ground, light and undisturbed. The third little pig remained in the doorway. He did not step inside at once. Instead, he looked across the field, following the direction the wolf had taken, his attention quiet but intent. The house stood firm at his back. The path lay open before him. After a time, he turned and stepped inside once more. The quiet returned, but it was not the same quiet as before. Something had shifted, not in the walls, nor in the ground beneath them, but in the shape of what would come next. And the third little pig, within the house he had built, held that understanding without speaking it. The morning did not wait. Before the first full light had settled across the land, the third little pig was already awake. The air held a cool stillness, the kind that comes just before the day begins to move. A faint line of pale gray rested along the horizon, not yet bright enough to cast shadows, but enough to mark where night would soon give way. He stepped out quietly. The house stood unchanged behind him, its steady shape in the dim light. He didn't linger there. Instead, he turned toward the path to begin the walk. His pace was measured, but purposeful. The ground felt firm beneath his feet, and the silence around him remained unbroken, except for the soft sound of his steps. There was no wind to carry movement ahead of him, no sign that anyone else had yet come this way. The field of turnips lay not far off. Even in the low light, the shape of it could be seen, a stretch of earth slightly darker than the ground around it, where the rows had been set in careful lines. The leaves, broad and low, held the faintest trace of moisture, catching what little light there was. He entered the field without pause. The work was simple. He bent, loosened the soil, and lifted the turnips one by one, gathering them into a small bundle. The earth gave easily beneath his hands, and the rhythm of the work settled into him without effort. He didn't rush, and yet he did not delay. When he gathered enough, he tied them together and lifted them over his shoulder. The weight was steady but manageable, and he adjusted it once before turning back toward the path. The light had begun to grow. A soft wash of pale gold spread slowly across the field, lifting the shadows and bringing the edges of the things into clearer view. It would not be long before the day fully arrived. He left as he had come, quietly, without pause. By the time he reached the rise in the ground that had led back to his house, the light had strengthened enough to cast a long shadow behind him. He didn't look back. Not long after, another figure appeared at the edge of the turnip field. The wolf. He moved as he always had, unhurried, certain. The morning light met him as he approached, revealing the lines of the field and the space within it. He stepped between the rows. For a moment, he said nothing. Then his gaze shifted. The earth had been disturbed. Not greatly, but enough. A few spaces where the soil had been turned, a place where the leaves no longer sat as they had before. The pattern of the field held, but it had been altered. The wolf stood still, taking this in. "Well now," he said quietly. The words didn't carry far. He walked a little further into the field, following the small signs left behind, the impressions in the soil, the places where something had been lifted and taken. After a time, he stopped. The morning had already moved forward. The light had fully settled now, and the stillness of the early hour had given way to the soft, continuous motion of the day. The wolf turned. He didn't follow the path at once, nor did he show any sign of haste. Instead, he stood for a moment longer, as though adjusting something in his understanding. Then he left the field. The following day passed much as the same, but again, before the light had fully come, the third little pig was already on the path. This time, he walked further. The orchard lay beyond the turnip field, past a stretch of open ground where the grass grew shorter and the air moved more freely. The trees stood in dark, quiet rows, and their quiet branches holding clusters of apples that had caught the early light in muted tones. He entered the orchard as he had entered the field, without hesitation. The ground beneath the trees was uneven, marked by fallen fruit and scattered leaves. He moved carefully, choosing his steps without attention as he approached the nearest tree. The apples hung just beyond easy reach. He looked up, gouging the distance, then placed his feet against the trunk and climbed. The branches held. They did not easily bend, nor did they shift beneath his weight. He moved upward with care, steadying himself as he reached the first cluster. He gathered what he could, one apple, then another, placed carefully into the fold of his arms. The light continued to grow. A faint sound reached him then, not loud, but distinct enough to be noticed. Movement. From the edge of the orchard, he paused. Below, between the rows of trees, the wolf had arrived. He moved more quickly this time, though not hurried. His path took him directly toward the tree where the pig stood, his gaze already lifted. "Well," he said, looking up through the branches, "you are an early one." The third little pig remained where he was. He didn't answer. The wolf came to stand beneath the tree. "You might come down," he said, his tone even. "The apples are better shared than taken alone." The pig looked down. The distance between them was not great. The branches held for him now, but they would not hold him there forever. For a moment, neither moved. Then, without warning, the pig shifted. He reached for one of the apples, held it briefly, then let it fall. The apple dropped cleanly through the branches. The wolf's gaze followed it. In that moment, the pig moved again. He climbed higher, then across, placing his weight carefully along the outer branches where they extended beyond the wolf's reach. From there, he dropped, not straight down, but outward, landing on the ground beyond the wolf's immediate position. He didn't pause. He ran. The orchard passed quickly around him, the rows of trees blurring into one another as he moved through them. The ground, uneven as it was, did not slow him enough to matter. Behind him, the wolf turned. He followed, but not with the same speed. By the time he reached the edge of the orchard, the pig had already crossed the open ground beyond. The distance between them widened. The wolf slowed. He didn't pursue further. Instead, he stood at the edge of the orchard, watching the place where the pig had gone. "Well," he said after a moment. The world settled into the air, carrying no strain, only quiet acknowledgement. By the time the next morning came, the pattern had shifted again. The third little pig rose even earlier than before. The sky had not yet begun to lighten when he stepped outside. The air held the last depth of night, and the path ahead was only just visible. He didn't wait. The road to the fair lay farther still, beyond the fields and the orchard, where the land opened into a broader stretch of ground. He walked steadily, the distance passing beneath his feet in a quiet rhythm. By the time the first hint of light appeared, he had already reached it. The fair stood in its early stages. A few carts, a few figures moving slowly between them, the beginnings of the gathering, not yet fully formed. He moved through it without drawing attention, selecting what he had come for, and turning away before the place had time to fill. By the time the sun rose, he was already on the path back. Later that morning, the wolf arrived. The fair had begun in earnest by then. The space had filled, the quiet of early morning replaced by the low, steady hum of voices and movement. He moved through it without pause, his gaze passing from one place to another. After a time, he stopped. The signs were familiar now. Something taken, something missed. He stood there for a moment, then gave the slightest shake of his head. "Well," he said softly. The word came easier this time. Then he turned, leaving the fair behind him. The path stretched on. The day continued. But what had begun as a simple pattern had changed into something else entirely. And the third little pig, moving ahead of it, had already begun to understand how. The day passed quietly after that. The fields held their shape beneath the light, and the distant movement of the fair faded once more into the ordinary rhythm of the land. By the time evening settled, the air had cooled, and a stillness returned that seemed deeper than before. Not empty, but settled, as though something had come to rest. The house of brick stood unchanged. Its walls held the less warmth of the day, though the light itself had begun to slip away. The ground around it lay undisturbed, and the path beyond, though open as always, gave no sign of what might come along it next. Inside, the third little pig moved quietly. He didn't pace, nor did he sit for long in any one place. Instead, he turned his attention to small things, the arrangement of what he had gathered, the placement of what might be yet needed. The movements were unhurried, but deliberate, each one completed before the next began. Outside, the light faded. Shadows lengthened, then softened into the even tone of early night. The sky deepened overhead, and the air settled fully, carrying only the faintest trace of movement across the open ground. For a time, nothing stirred. Then, along the path, something did. The wolf approached. He came as he had before, measured, unhurried, certain. His steps made no sound that carried far, and the land didn't resist to his passing. When he reached the house, he didn't call out. Instead, he stood a moment, regarding the doorway, the walls, the roofline that had held steady against the darkening sky. "Well," he said at last, his voice low, almost conversational, "you have kept yourself well." Inside, the third little pig didn't answer. The wolf remained where he was. "I have tried the door," he went on after a moment, "and I have tried the walls." His tone held no strain, no frustration, only a quiet acknowledgement of what had passed. "There are other ways," he said. The words did not press. They settled. After a moment, the wolf stepped back, his gaze lifting slightly toward the roof. The chimney rose there, narrow but open, its line clear against the dimming sky. He regarded it for a moment longer. Then, without further word, he moved. The ground gave way to the side of the house, and from there, with a steady and practiced motion, he climbed. The bricks held firm beneath its weight, offering no resistance to its ascent. He reached the roof. The air there moved slightly more freely, carrying the faintest current of night across the surface. He crossed it, without hesitation, and came to the opening of the chimney. For a moment, he paused. Then, he lowered himself within. Inside, the third little pig stood still. He had heard the movement above. Not clearly, but enough. The shift of weight, the faint sound carried through the structure, the sense of something drawing closer in a way that did not follow the path of the door. He turned toward the hearth. The fire had been set earlier, though not fully lit. A flame rested low, steady but contained. Above it, a pot had been placed, its contents warming slowly. He stepped forward and adjusted it. The movement was quiet, controlled. He didn't hurry. The sound above grew nearer. A faint scraping, then the soft shift of something descending through the narrow space in the chimney. The third little pig stepped back. The air within the room held steady. Then all at once, the space above the hearth gave way. The wolf came down through the chimney. There was no long fall, no drawn-out motion, only the sudden arrival, a shift of air, and the unmistakable presence of him within the house. And then, the moment closed. The flame rose, not violently, but enough. The pot shifted. There was a brief, sharp sound, quickly gone. Then stillness. The night settled again. The air within the house returned to its quiet state, the fire lowering once more to a steady glow. The pot rested where it had been set, its contents no longer disturbed. Nothing moved. After a time, the third little pig stepped forward. He didn't look upward, nor toward the chimney. Instead, he adjusted the fire slightly, ensuring it remained as it should, then moved the pot aside with care. The house stood. The walls held. The quiet, once broken, returned again. Not as it had been before, but with a deeper sense of completion. Outside, the night carried on. The fields lay still beneath the sky, and the path, though open, remained empty. No sound came from it. No movement followed. Within the house, the third little pig settled. He did not return to the doorway, nor did he stand listening for what might come next. Instead, he moved to a space within the room and lowered himself to rest. The work had been done. What had been built had held, and what had come to test it had not remained. The fire gave a soft, steady light. The walls stood firm around it, and the third little pig, within the house he had made, rested at last in a quiet that did not shift. The night passed. The morning would come. But nothing that came with it would undo what had already been made certain. Now, the house stands quiet. The fire has settled to a steady glow. The bricks hold their warmth. The small room rests within it, just as it was left, orderly, calm, and undisturbed. And outside, the fields lie still beneath the night sky, stretching wide and untroubled. What was tested was held. What was uncertain has been made sure. And the world, in its quiet way, has come back into balance. Somewhere, beyond the path, the wind moves softly through the grass, unchanged, unhurried, as though it has always known how things would settle in the end. And here, within these walls, something steady remains, not built in haste, but shaped with time, with care, and with quiet understanding. So now, you may rest too. Let the house grow still around you. Let the fire dim to a soft and distant glow. Let the path fade gently from view, and let sleep come easily, without effort. There is nothing more to prepare, nothing more to watch for, only stillness now, only warmth, only rest. Sleep now. You are safe. You are held. And you've been listening to Nikki Wu Cozy Stories, created by Nicole T. Woodard. May your dreams be gentle and your sleep be deep.